It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, folks, welcome in. Have a great slate of herd mentality items to get to, some stuff about Josh Allen and how he's going to function in this new look offense, the most improved position group on the team, the safety pairing, Higgins versus Keon Coleman. That'll be fun. Some roster building stuff. Tyler Bass, we'll talk about that a little bit. And even my projected week one inactive. So many things coming your way today. Let's get into it. The first one is from Tommy. And I think Tommy has a question that highlights what I think a lot of Bills fans are thinking right now. And so I'm going to read this from Tommy and then, of course, add my commentary to it. Here's what Tommy said. So I keep getting into the same argument with my buddies, round and round in circles like good Bills fans do. I'm of the opinion that although there's a drop-off on talent on paper, Josh Allen is in better position to exceed with his current wide receiver room as opposed to last year. I find this new group of diverse and hungry mouths to feed as an exciting new opportunity and perhaps just what the doctor ordered. My friends think I'm being a blind optimist or company man, as the saying goes. They're down on the fact that we got rid of our only bona fide number one wide receiver and replaced him with a group of number twos and bargain bin unknowns. I know from listening to this podcast that you tend to lean towards my point of view. My question is, do you think if we were on the outside looking in as non-Bills fans, we would be laughing at the current situation? $30 million dead cap for Diggs, no one to replace him, tons of playmakers and vets lost to free agency, etc., and writing them off as primed to surely regress this season? Is it only because of our Buffalo rose tinted glasses that we're seeing the best in this situation? My prediction is that by week 6 or 7, the Buffalo Bills are going to be full of positive energy and having one of their best seasons of the Josh Allen era. And all the jaded Debbie Downers will be frowning in the stands like Randy Quaid in Major League 2. Maybe I'm going a bit overboard here. What are your thoughts? I think this is exactly where a lot of people are. And I'll tell you what, I am excited to see Josh Allen function in the new offense. I think the unknowns make it interesting. The unknowns make it appealing. We know what the last iteration of the Buffalo Bills could do. They can win the division. They could win a playoff game, maybe 2, and then lose when they got to a game against the Chiefs or the Bengals. That's what we learned for 4 years in a row. And so, yeah, I'm excited to try something different. And while you look at different and maybe on paper, as you outlined, it's not quite as good. But maybe despite not having the same level of talent, there's plenty of reasons to be excited about what this team can do and maybe even go further than they have over the last 4 or 5 seasons. And I think what's kind of lost in this overall conversation about the exodus of talent that the Bills have had is that they were aging and expiring players. Like, we all love Mitch Morrison, Jordan Poyer, and Micah Hyde, but those guys weren't what they've been. Tre'Davious White hasn't played in 2 years. Stefon Diggs stunk out loud down the stretch. I mean, this is part of transition in the NFL. This is what happens. Guys get older. The salary cap dictates new dynamics and new decisions. And at different points in your life cycle as a team, you have to make different decisions. And so it's not like they walked away from vintage Jordan Poyer, right? Or vintage Stefon Diggs. It wasn't that caliber performance over the last couple of years or the most recent stretch of time. And again, I think that the unknowns are appealing. And I'll be honest with you, in kind of seeing the reaction to the Bills and the decisions that they've made this offseason, I've realized that there are two types of analysts, and I'll be completely candid with you. I don't consume a lot of football analysis, right? I just don't. Maybe occasionally something that comes across my timeline, I might watch it, or maybe there's a YouTube video or something that piques my interest and I might watch that. But for the most part, I don't really spend a lot of time consuming football analysis. I spend a lot of time studying film, and I spend a lot of time studying statistics and teams and developing my own opinion. So I don't have a great pulse on what's going on in terms of what's being said out there. But from what I have been able to gather, I find there to be two different types of analysts. Those who look at things at a surface level and then just react, right? And just kind of ride the wave and lean into whatever the trendy talking points are. And then there's those who actually take a deeper look at a situation and ask themselves why, right? Why are teams making the decisions that they do? Why did the Bills make the choice to move on from Stefon Diggs and Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, et cetera, et cetera? They didn't do that because they just wanted to become a worse football team. There's reasons for it. And some of them are just bigger than football. And I think you can listen to Josh Allen, other players, the coaching staff, and realize that the makeup of this football team is a little bit different based on that commentary and talking about how important it is to be unselfish and be a team and play together and do the little things, right? You can definitely sense that as a theme and listening to the players and coaches speak to this point in the offseason. Now, going back to your question here, Tommy, and the headspace that you find yourself in, I think it is the optimistic angle. There's no doubt about it. But it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's interesting. It's appealing. You still got Josh Allen. And leaning in on the Stefon Diggs talking point, because I think that's where most people get hung up. Well, Josh Allen doesn't have a number one wide receiver. Well, the Bills didn't move on from 2020 Stefon Diggs. They moved on from 2023 Stefon Diggs. And for as good as he started 2023, from week 7 on, he was not very good. From week 7 on, as I've said repeatedly, on 60 less targets, Khalil Shakir outproduced Stefon Diggs from week 7 on. Let's look at Stefon Diggs' numbers over that stretch. 111 targets from week 7 on. That's 5th most in the NFL. So plenty of opportunities still going to Stefon Diggs. Came away with 68 catches, a reception percentage of 61.3%, 636 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, 1.4 yards per route run. That's terrible. 10.2 average depth of target, so you didn't get much down the field from him. A 9.3% drop rate. And Josh Allen had a passer rating of 78.5 when throwing the ball to Stefon Diggs from week 7 on. That's not good. And if you look at that through this lens, so some of those metrics, I want to highlight where they fall among the overall landscape of wide receivers. So there was 32 receivers in the NFL that from week 7 on had 70 or more targets. Here's where Stefon Diggs ranked. With those 111 targets, that's the 5th most. The 61.3 reception percentage, that's 24th. The 1.4 yards per route run, that's 31st. The 10.2 average depth of target, that's 24th. The 9.3% drop rate, that's 27th out of 32. The passer rating of 78.5, that's 30th. So I'm okay moving on from that. I don't want to funnel that volume of targets to that level of production. So yeah, I'm excited about the unknowns, and I'm excited that the catalyst, the actual catalyst for the offense, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, those guys are all back. And that there's been more depth added to this mix. So yeah, is it the rosy perspective? Sure, that absolutely is. But it doesn't mean it's the wrong perspective. And I think it's completely reasonable to say, yeah, there's some unknown elements about this football team, but I'm intrigued by what it can do. I'm intrigued by the newness and the unknown variables, and that should make for a really exciting 2024 season. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? The Bills aren't going to win the Super Bowl? Is that the worst thing that's going to happen? Well, they never have, folks. So put it on the board for another year where the Bills don't win the Super Bowl, but at least there's a new direction, a necessary new direction based on some of the age of this roster and how the salary cap has aligned and working towards that next era of Josh Allen football with the Buffalo Bills. That's what this is all about. No idea how it's going to work out, but that's what makes it very interesting and exciting for me. All right, we got a lot more to get to, and just like last herd mentality, I spent more time than I ever thought on the first question. So we got a bunch more to get to, so be sure to stick with me. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet on all of it over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet on everything from who's going to be the MVP to who's going to hit a home run, all over at FanDuel. They've also got some fun Bills stuff that you can check out. They have the Bills at plus 160 to win the AFC East. They have the Bills win total, the over-under set at 10.5. You can check that out. Also, Josh Allen to be the NFL MVP. The odds for that is plus 800. So check it out. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks. The next one here comes from Chris. I like this question a lot. Chris said, now that you've gone over all sides of the ball and told us how you feel the Bills have gotten better or worse, what position group as a whole do you think has had the greatest improvement from last season heading into this coming season? And to remind you guys, last week, Monday and Tuesday, I went through every position and I asked myself, are the Bills better right now or were they better in 2023? And to answer this question from Chris, I think the position group that had the greatest improvement from last season coming into this season is defensive tackle. And I know Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones are the same, but the depth, in my opinion, is way better. I didn't think much of Tim Settle or Jordan Phillips. I don't think those are very good football players. I think they're replacement level depth players. And those guys have played a lot of football over the last couple of seasons. And I think you have significantly upgraded those guys with Austin Johnson, Deshawn Williams, and Dewayne Carter. I mean, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, and Linval Joseph / Puna Ford. Swapping them out for Austin Johnson, Deshawn Williams, and Dewayne Carter, I like that so much better. I think you have a legit player in Austin Johnson in terms of an A-gap defender that can play in relief of Daquan Jones, that I think for some teams could probably start. I think he's a quality depth player. I really like what I saw on tape from Deshawn Williams, and I think he can be even better as a 3 technique and a penetration style role. And then, of course, you have a good-looking young rookie in Dewayne Carter. Give me that over Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips. I got so tired of watching those guys. And they played a ton. So here's the deal. Maybe you're thinking, well, Joe, this is really what you're talking about, the depth at defensive tackle? Yeah, I'm talking about it. In 2023, non-Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones snaps, that equaled 1,145. In 2022, non-Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones snaps, that's 849. And I know that last year was probably inflated a bit because Daquan Jones missed a big stretch of time. So you're still looking at 800, 900 snaps at defensive tackle that are going to be taken by other players than Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver. And I think you have significantly put better players in position to take those snaps this year. So that's a big part of what gets me excited for this year and where I feel like the team has made the greatest level of improvement. The next one here comes from Nate. A good question here from Nate. He says, my question concerns the safeties. One of the things that appeared to make Hyde and Poyer so good was not only that they were such great individual players, but they also complemented each other's skill sets so well. For our current set of potential starting safeties, Rapp, Edwards, Bishop, what are their strengths? And assuming for sake of the discussion that each reaches a reasonable level of play, which 2 safeties most naturally complement each other as a pair of starters? Good question here. And I think you're exactly right. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, individually great players, but also they complemented each other well. And I think where their complementary nature really shined, is that they are both interchangeable. I think that you could look at both Poyer and Hyde and say, you want to play them in the high post as a single high center fielder? They can do it. They can play as a low safety in the box. They can play split zones in coverage. They can play in the slot. And I think vintage Hyde and Poyer could do any of those roles. And so that the complementary nature of them was because of how interchangeable and versatile that they are. Now, I still think you go get Micah Hyde and say, yeah, that guy was at his best as a high post center fielder. And you go look at Jordan Poyer and say he was at his best as a low safety playing in the box. And so while they were still interchangeable, they still had their own individual areas where they shined the most. When I look at this group, I think the most complementary safety pairing is Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp. But I do think that there's a missing skill set across the board here, and it is in that center field one high, the high post stability. Mike Edwards is the guy that I feel the best about doing that. I like him most in those deeper alignments. So any complementary pairing includes Mike Edwards as one of the safeties because I think he's the best deep zone defender. And then I think Taylor Rapp is the guy that's best positioned right now to come in and be the more low safety that complements that. I think they're less interchangeable because I don't necessarily love Taylor Rapp as that deep zone defender. I think Mike Edwards is the guy that I trust the versatility a little bit more. Now, we know the future here is Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop. Cole Bishop, second-round pick, Taylor Rapp, 3-year extension. So between that group, what I'm very curious to find out is who becomes the guy that you trust in those deeper zones. Because both of those guys project best to me as lower safeties that you want to play closer to the line of scrimmage, ask them to play downhill, maybe do some man-to-man coverage against tight ends, but are they really high post safeties? I think that's where my question comes. So Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp, Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop is where I land on that. Tom has a good question here. The questions are really good this week. I think the offseason allows us to get a little bit less focused on singular things and you get kind of big-brained a little bit, and I think the questions are so good. This one's a good one from Tom. Tom says, could you compare your scouting reports for Keon Coleman and Teon Higgins? I really combined them right there. Keon Coleman and T. Higgins. I vaguely remember you not being high on Higgins coming out of Clemson and was curious how they compare on your grade scale and how similar they are as prospects. So Tom's correct. I didn't love T. Higgins coming out of Clemson, and it wasn't because I didn't think he was a good prospect. I had him as a late one early too. I liked him a lot as a prospect. I didn't like him for the Bills. That was my whole thing about T. Higgins. I didn't think he was the right receiver for the Buffalo Bills. And again, these conversations happened before the Bills traded for Stefon Diggs. And let me compare them, and I'll kind of get to my main point here. T. Higgins is 6'4", 216. Keon Coleman is 6'3" 3/4", 213 pounds. So very similar statures. Higgins has got a little bit more arm length, 2 inches actually, 34 1/8 on the arms for T. Higgins. And Keon Coleman has 32 1/8 inch arms, but still profile as similar players. What it comes down to with both of them is that they're just stylistically not my preference of wide receiver. In particular with Josh Allen, because those aren't the type of receivers that we've seen Josh Allen have a lot of success with. Where I thought Josh Allen really found success throwing the football to was guys that really accelerated as route runners and separators. Stefon Diggs, Cole Beasley, John Brown, Emmanuel Sanders. Those are the guys, the profile of receiver, route runner, separation guys that can get in and out of breaks. I thought that presented the most attractive options for Josh Allen because I think Josh Allen is more of a visual player than an anticipatory player. And so I think that ability to establish yourself as open and present an available target is what Josh Allen thrives throwing the football to. And I don't look at either T. Higgins or Keon Coleman as good separators. And T. Higgins has been very, very good in the NFL, but it's not because he's a great separator. Last year, T. Higgins had 2.3 yards of separation per target. That's 103rd in the NFL. In 2022, he was even lower. I think T. Higgins has a production that he does because he plays with Joe Burrow. What's Joe Burrow? An anticipatory quarterback. As mentally good as any quarterback that you'll see, and that combination of, hey, high-level anticipation plus accuracy, that leads to him being a great pair, right? Burrow and Higgins, a great pair. And I'm not saying that Higgins couldn't be productive for the Bills, and I'm not saying that Keon Coleman can't be productive for the Bills, but when you look at the types of receivers that Josh Allen's had success throwing the football to, it hasn't been stylistically those types of guys. Think about Gabe Davis. I think Gabe Davis is more of an extreme example of T. Higgins or Keon Coleman, but there was production, but there was inefficiency as well. And I think that's the world I don't want to sign up for. I want to sign up for the efficiency, the consistency that you got when the Josh Allen's throwing the ball to Diggs and Beasley and Sanders and Brown. And so that's where it was really rooted. It's not that I don't like Keon Coleman. It's not that I don't like T. Higgins. It's that I think that separators is not only what works best with Josh Allen, but it's also my personal preference in terms of wide receivers. So that's where that all aligns for me. And I hope that answer made sense for everyone listening. All right, we got more fun stuff to get to here on the other side of it, including a fun roster building experiment that Papa T's putting me through. Tyler Bass and inactives. Got an early question about inactives, so be sure to stick with me. All right, folks, the next one here comes from Papa T. Papa T says this: I took the top 5 player salaries of 6 NFL teams, the Bills, Chiefs, Bengals, Ravens, Eagles, and Niners. And the average salary of those top 5 players per team is right at $100 million. This is just under 40% of the salary cap. In this scenario, you are a fictitious general manager, and you can select any 5 players from the NFL who are no longer on the rookie deals for 1 year using the AAV of their current contract, not their 2024 cap hit. And the total cap hit has to come in around 40% of the cap. Which 5 players would you select? I always enjoy the team building conversations, and I'm very curious to see which positions you prioritize and which players' contracts stand out to you. Fun question, Papa T, and I have an answer for you. But the one thing that I will say is that I feel like this answer is somewhat reflective of my team building preferences, but probably more reflective of the combination of my team building preferences and contracts that really stand out to me, because it's pretty tricky to do this, right? It's got to come in around 40%. So I'm going to come in at 42%. So I'm going to go a little bit higher, but I'm close. You said around. I think within 2% is pretty reasonable. So here's my choices. The first 2 were very easy. These were guys I had to have. Quarterback Patrick Mahomes, $45 million. I'm taking that. That's a sprint to the podium. I like Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen's the second best player in the league. I think he's the second best quarterback in the league, but I'm picking Mahomes. All right. Sorry. You can yell at me all you want. So Patrick Mahomes, $45 million. That's my first choice. My next choice was an easy one. Defensive end, Myles Garrett. $25 million is his AV. And what is Nick Bosa's like pushing mid-30 now? I think this is one of the best value contracts in the league. I think Myles Garrett is unbelievable. He's a game wrecker. He changes the way you can play offense. I think he's unbelievable. So him at $25 million was an easy choice. Then I want to get myself a wide receiver. I think the best value deal out there for a wide receiver is DJ Moore from the Bears at $20.6 million AAV. I think he's a true number 1 receiver. I'm unbelievably impressed with his ability to be productive despite quarterback play, whether that's at Maryland, right? His last season at Maryland, he was the only Big Ten wide receiver to have 1,000 yards, and I think they played 3 or 4 quarterbacks. I think their first 2 quarterbacks got injured in the first couple of games of the season. Still had 1,000 yards, the only Big Ten receiver to do it. Then he goes to Carolina, the quarterback stink there. Goes to the Bears, the quarterback stink there, and he's just produces over and over. Every level of the field threat, wins after the catch. He's a dude. So DJ Moore at $20.6 million. Then I need to get myself a left tackle, but I don't have much money left, right? Because it's got to come in a little over $100 million, and I've already got 45 to Mahomes, 25 to Garrett, and 20 to DJ Moore. So I need to find some value here with a left tackle. I went with Patrick McCarry from the Ravens. His AAV is $7.1 million. With how injured Ronnie Stanley has been for them in Baltimore, this guy's played a lot of left tackle for them. And I think he was a bargain bin deal that gives me an answer at left tackle. I wanted to have something there. I thought that was a good value play. And then I had to get myself another dude for the defensive line. And I didn't have much to play with. So I went with Zach Sealer from the Miami Dolphins, interior defensive lineman. His contract is $10.25 million AAV. And I couldn't find another defensive lineman that offers the same level of disruption for a dollar amount that would allow me to fit him in. I thought about Hassan Reddick at $15 million. But I felt like that was kind of pushing it a little bit too much. You said around 40%. I'm at 42%. If I put Hassan Reddick in there, I think that would get a little bit higher. And so I thought, it was the most attractive option to keep it within the parameters that were given to me. But I think to just kind of get it back to team building, I got to have a quarterback. I got to have dudes on the defensive line. I got to have a stud left tackle, and I need a playmaker. I need a playmaker on offense, probably a wide receiver. So that's how it comes in. That's a fun experiment. You guys should do that as well. Work through it and leave me a comment on YouTube and let me know who you would pick under those parameters. Fun question, Papa T. And Papa T, you let me know who you picked. You told me you did the project, so shoot me a text and let me know. Nigel says, hi. This is going to be an in tandem question from Nigel and Buff. Nigel says, how tight are the Bills to Tyler Bass? I know that the Bills made him one of the top paid kickers, but if training camp shows more and more multiple 35-yard misses in practice, come on, brother. And we needed to get a different kicker for the season. How big of a pain would it be in terms of financial ramifications? And the Buff says, I have a question for the week. Should we be worried about Tyler Bass given how last season went and the reports out of camp that he's missing easy field goals? So if the Bills were to release Tyler Bass, keeping in mind this is year one of his 4-year, $20 million extension. If he's released, the Bills would have zero salary cap relief this year or next, and you'd have $4.3 million in dead cap this year, $3.1 million in dead cap next year. Not good. Not good. There's no relief, and you lose cap space. The win here, folks, is that Tyler Bass is the kicker that Brandon Beane is paying him to be. That's what has to happen here. We know he's capable of better, right? He's been a better kicker than he was down the stretch last year, and of course, what we've heard so far from camp. But, I mean, even the first 6 games of the season, I think he was perfect on extra points and field goals. So we know he's capable of being a lot better. There's a reason the Bills gave him the contract that they did, and we didn't really question it at the time. And here's the big thing that you have to ask yourself with Tyler Bass. If you move on, again, you're signing up for $4.3 million in dead cap this year, $3.1 million in dead cap next year. If you move on and you make that choice to eat that dead cap, you have to be confident that you can actually upgrade the spot because you're going to have a lot invested here. You have to be able to actually upgrade the spot. The one thing you don't want to do is go from a mediocre to bad kicker to a mediocre to bad kicker, but oh, by the way, you're just going to lose a bunch of cap space. That's silly. So your best path here is for Tyler Bass to be the player he's supposed to be. And I think you got to let it play out a little bit here. You've kind of signed up for this. We'll see what happens. But to me, that's what needs to happen. Tyler Bass needs to be a good kicker. And I think, 88 to 92% is kind of the range I want him to be clutch, make the field goals in big moments. That's what you need him to be. But last year for him to be around 82%, 2 of 5 in the postseason, misses that were not from distance, it's got to get turned around. There's no question. Last one here comes from Chris, and this builds off of the podcast I did yesterday, which was my 53-man roster projection. Chris says, based on the 53-man roster projection you just made, assuming that's the final roster, excuse me, and everyone is 100% healthy for week 1 against Arizona, who do you think the 48 active players will be for week 1? So who are my inactives? That's what he's asking. Who are my week 1 inactives if the Bills roster everyone that I said and everyone's healthy? I have 5 of them. Cedric Van Pran Granger. I'd still have 8 active offensive linemen. He's a rookie. And I have Alec Anderson who can snap. And so that would be my backup center. Dewayne Carter, another rookie. I still have 4 defensive tackles, so I feel comfortable with him being inactive. Cole Bishop. I don't know how ready he's going to be. And I would still have Edwards, Rapp, Hamlin, and Cam Lewis to play safety. Edefuan Ulofoshio, he's a rookie. I'd still have 5 linebackers dressed. And then my last choice would be between Daquan Hardy and Chase Claypool. Daquan Hardy, if he was going to be my punt returner, then I would definitely have him active. But if he's just going to be a backup in the slot, I would make him inactive because in that scenario, I could just have Cam Lewis get me out of the game at slot corner if Taron Johnson were to get injured. If he was not going to be my punt returner, then I'd have Chase Claypool inactive and keep 5 receivers active on game day. So there you go. That's how I stack it up as of right now. But obviously, there's never going to be that perfect scenario of, hey, you perfectly projected the 53-man roster, and oh, by the way, everyone's healthy. But still a fun thought exercise. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, got a guest lined up for you. It's going to be a fun conversation, a different angle to look at the Bills through. So don't miss it. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.